Mood is right, the spirit's up, we're here tonight, and that's enough. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time.
Hi everyone, this is the Oxford and Cambridge project. I'm Opportune Simon. So today we have Seb Johns with us. Seb is currently the Assistant Head of Music at Epsom College, an independent school in Surrey, England. He started teaching just after graduating from Corpus Christi College in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in music. Seb was born in Oxford, but went to school in Cambridge, where he sang with King's College Choir from age 8 to 13. And he then sang with the choir again as a choral scholar when he studied at Cambridge University. And he followed the daily routine of chapel services throughout term time with the King's Choir, and he was also a member of the Kingsmen. Alongside teaching, Seb now enjoys helping his students prep for musical degrees at Oxbridge. Hi Seb, so good to have you here.
Hello, pleasure.
So you're currently talking to us from your school, Epsom. How is that? How's school treating you?
Yeah,
or
it's
teaching,
good.
shall I say?
It's good. I love it. I mean, I see lots of my friends who are doing various different jobs, and I think, well, here I am being paid to swan around a music department, doing a bit of teaching, writing some music, conducting some music. It's not a bad way to be spending my years at the moment. So yeah, it's good.
Well, I would say you're, one of the people shaping the minds of our young generation. So here you go.
Hopefully in the right direction.
I'm sure. And Seb, I want to go all about talking about music degrees at Oxbridge and obviously talking about your college, Corpus Christi. But first, please could you give us an overview of like your background, why you decided to study music, and just how you got to apply to Cambridge?
So I was born into a pretty musical family. Both of my parents studied music at university as well. So it was always a big part of my life from when I was young. I started learning the piano when I was about 3 or 4. So got started quite early. And then, as you said, I actually went to school in Cambridge. I was a chorister at King's College School. So I sung with King's Choir from the age of 8. So I spent 5 years there as a boy, singing in the chapel every day. And then there's the prep school that sort of goes with the college. That then finished at 13. So I then went to secondary school near Oxford. But it was... Lots of my friends went through when they were at school trying to work out what subject they wanted to study. But for me, it was just always going to be music, and I always wanted to go back to Cambridge really. And fortunately, the stars aligned and it all kind of worked out that way. So yeah, it's one of the more academic music courses that there is really. So lots of the preparation was about reading and listening beyond the A-level course to just expand my knowledge of music, of composers, of histories, of social context behind music, that sort of thing. I did a fair bit of practicing sort of compositional skills, so things like writing harmony underneath hymn melodies, because I knew that was going to be a part of the course. But yeah, just lots of listening, reading, and sort of practicing writing music in different styles. That was the main sort of prep. One of the perks about applying for music is that, unlike certain subjects where it's quite specific what A-levels you have to do, with music you just need music, and then the others you can do what you like. So I've also got an A-level in French and geography. I did an AS in psychology while I was there, just because it seemed like it was going to be good fun. So yeah, music was a big part, but you were then free to sort of choose the other ones, which was nice. So I've probably forgotten most of the French, but I can still order a coffee in Paris, and that's the main thing.
That is definitely the main thing. Coffee and croissant That's all you need.
Exactly. And I can say croissant as well. So I feel like I'm a pro.
Yeah, I mean, that got you the A level for sure. And so can you tell us about your application and how did that go? I guess doing your personal statement, you had already a pretty strong one, I assume, from having all those years at King's College Choir. But yeah, do you remember anything about it? And then also about your interviews as well?
One of the things that I say to the pupils here, that, you know, the personal statement space, it's an opportunity to kind of try and show off a little bit and say, I've done all of these things. Look how interested I am in your subject. So that was sort of the policy that I went for. Then, yeah, the interview. So I had 2 actual interviews on the day and then some tests as well. The first interview was, they gave me a piece of music. It didn't tell you who it was by, and you had to sort of try and work out who might have written it and just sort of analyze it, which you'd never really done as part of the music A level. So again, I mean, yeah, it's just to try and make you think so that they can see how your brain would process a piece of music that you'd never seen before. And it was, you know, one of those experiences. They said, who do you think has written this? And I think I went for Beethoven, and you kind of got that. I have absolutely no idea if I've nailed that or not. But yeah, so that was the first one. Then I had some tests. So things like the more composition-y stuff. So I think they gave us a sort of hymn melody, and then we had to write the chords that we thought would work underneath. And that, you usually didn't have a piano. You had to hear it all in your head. So that's quite tricky. And then to various other things, like there's something called figured bass. So you get a bass line and then some numbers underneath which tell you all the chords that you need. And so you had to write melodies over the top of that. So those are the tests. And then the second interview that I had, they gave me an academic article about, I can't remember what it was about at all, but some sort of academic article about music that they then said, right, you got half an hour to read this, make some notes, jot down some thoughts, whatever, and then we'll just talk about it. And so that I never really read proper academic articles about music before. So that was tough, trying to kind of decipher what they were talking about. But yeah, it's just, the interviews were basically just sort of chatting about the music, the writing, you know, them asking you sort of probing questions and then seeing how you think, really.
You applied for the Choral Scholarship.
The way it works now actually is that it used to be that you'd apply really early on in September of upper sixth for a choral scholarship or an organ scholarship. And then basically they do your interview as part of that, and then you get an offer or not get an offer on the back of that. But it's a bit different now because the focus, quite rightly, is much more on the academic side of things. And I think the sort of view is, if you can sing, that's cool, but with, you know, you're here to study a degree. So you go through the normal application process first, hopefully get an interview, and then obviously on the back of that, hopefully get an offer. And then it gets to choral stuff. So all the colleges have what they call the vocal assessment day, which is in September. So you can go along before interviews and then sing to a few people, and they can then give you some advice as to whether they think that you should consider applying to that college, because they then might want you in the choir. But yeah, you don't actually apply for a choral scholarship until after any offers have been given out. The sort of aim of it is that then the directors of music will get in touch with you and they'll say either, thanks very much for coming, but I don't think a place in our choir is going to work out, or they might ring you up and say, thanks very much for coming, I really recommend that you put in an application for our college. And basically what that means is apply, hopefully you get in, and if you do, we're probably going to give you a choral scholarship at the end of it. But the actual choral scholarship auditions happen later, which is why things like my situation are becoming a bigger thing. So as I said, I applied for King's, didn't get an offer from King's, but got saved by the redeeming hands of Corpus. And then on the back of that, and having gone to that vocal assessment day, I then got in touch with the director of music at King's and said, look, I'm going to King's, but I'm in Corpus. Can I still sing in King's choir? And then they do what they call a choral volunteership. So it's quite a new thing. You've basically got choral scholarships, which is where if you are actually singing in the choir of the college you are at, you will become a choral scholar. But you can sing for any other college choir that you like, and then they call you a choral volunteer. You are literally, it's exactly the same thing. They just can't call you a choral scholar because you're not at that college. So of the 16 choral singers at King's when I was there, I think about 5 or 6 of us were actually not at King's. So it's a much bigger thing now. Lots of people will be in one college and sing for another, which is quite nice actually, because it means that you can sort of have multiple different sort of college and choir experiences at the same time, which is cool. And there are certain people who actually will sing for multiple different choirs at the same time.
And I guess like the only drawback that you'd have is you have to like walk a bit further when you have to do chapel services every day. But that's really
and so I actually lucked out because my room in Corpus was about 300 meters from the entrance to King's Chapel. So I kind of accidentally smashed it.
And so then can you tell us about the structure of the music degree at Cambridge? I imagine, as you said, that it's very much more focused on the academic side of music. So
yeah,
can you tell us about that?
Yeah.
I
So
really have no idea.
Yeah. So one of the things that I say to people who are thinking about maybe studying a music degree is you've got to do some research into the different courses at different universities, because particularly with something like music, the difference in course from one university to the other is massive. Some universities will put a really big emphasis on performance. So it's, a big part of what you learn and then what you're then examined in. Other places like Cambridge, it's much more about the academics. So performance is still a part of it, and you can choose to do performance as part of your year. So in third year, if you take the performance paper, that will be worth a 6th, but it's never more than that. So it's worth bearing in mind actually with the Cambridge course, whilst performance is there, it's not necessarily the primary focus. It's all about the academics. So there's lots of history, lots of theory, lots of sort of studying how different music is written. In the way that it runs is you've got the first and second year are part 1A and 1B, and then your third year is part 2. So throughout first and second year, there's a history course which runs across the 2, which basically takes you from 1000 to 1960. So you cover quite a lot of music. And that's about the history behind composers, the different styles that were going on at the time, context behind compositions, context behind why music changed over time, that sort of thing. That's the history paper. Then there's quite a lot of theory-based stuff. So analysis is quite a big part. Sort of, looking at a Beethoven piano sonata and analysing how it was written, that kind of thing. There's something called keyboard skills, which is stuff like they'll give you a piece to play on the piano, but you've got to play it in a different key, or they'll give you a piece for soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and you've got to play it, which obviously you're used to playing 2 lines of music on a piano, so to try and suddenly condense 4. It's things like that, useful skills if you want to go and just be a general musician later on. There's something called tonal skills, which is where you study the music of lots of different composers and sort of study how they wrote their music. And then you practice writing in lots of different styles. It's basically pastiche composition. And then the exam at the end, I really liked it. I found it good fun, but they'll give you a Schubert song, and they'll give you the first 2 bars and then just the soprano line for the rest of it. And you've got to write the piano accompaniment as if you were Schubert. Or they'll give you the first sort of 3 bars of a Palestrina mass, and then you've got to write the rest of the mass in the style of Palestrina. So it's quite niche, but I really, really enjoyed that sort of stuff. So yeah, like learning what Schubert did in his piano accompaniments and learning how Palestrina wrote his masses, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very academic. It's one of the most academic music courses I think there probably is going around. There is a bit of performance which you can choose. So I did performance in my first and second year as part of one of the papers. You can do some composition as well as an option if you like. But yeah, there's lots of history, lots of theory, and sort of studying different musical styles and learning how to do that yourself. Quite a lot of people will go to a place like Cambridge to do an academic music degree, and then will go on and do a master's in performance at a conservatoire. rather than go and do a 3-year course at a conservatoire straight out. So quite a lot of my friends from my year then went on to places like Royal Academy of Music, Royal College of Music, to specialise in their instrument after that. Quite a few famous conductors out there who've done the course because of what you learn. It's all about, learning about just a huge range of musical styles. It feeds quite well into becoming a musical director or a conductor. A fair few actually do what I've done and go into teaching, because just the skill set that it sets you up with, really broad. As obviously you leave as one would hope, as a pretty decent academic on music, and then with a whole range of keyboard and conducting and directing skills. So it feeds quite nicely into that sort of career. But at the same time, loads of people do their music degree, say, thanks very much, I'm now going to do something else, and then go into completely unrelated careers. I think just the nature of what music is, if you're doing a music degree, you probably really like music. So most people end up in music in some way. But yeah, there are certainly people who go on to do different things.
Where is the music faculty in Cambridge?
Music faculty is up in the Sidgwick site, which
Very
is
nice.
where most of them are. So it's next to English, quite close to the law faculty. There's that big collection of faculties out there, and so the music department's there. It's really nice. There's a big concert hall in the middle of the faculty, which is nice. Lots of sort of practice rooms surrounding it. They've got recording studios there, so it's a pretty cool little building to go to.
Cool, definitely. And Sidgwick site is always quite a buzzing place in Cambridge, given that everyone swarms in there in the mornings for lectures and just chills around there because there's so many libraries you can go to.
The music department is actually just across the road from the King's Choir School. So when I went to lectures, I could see the window where I was at boarding school. I could literally see where I used to sleep when I was 12 years old. So I literally went all the way to Oxford for school, secondary school, and then back right across the road from where I was first at school, which was slightly odd. But I obviously learned to love the city when I was there as a boy at school. But going back then as a student later on, it's like, oh my word, there's so much more to this place than I'd ever seen before.
Yeah, I often think that having known people who have grown up in Cambridge all their life and then went to the university, they actually discovered way more in like 3 years than they had in their entire life, because when you're a student, you can just go freely in any colleges, and I would say half of the city is colleges and faculties.
Yeah. For people trying to choose between Oxford and Cambridge, that's quite often a big thing to consider, is they're actually, the feel of the cities is really quite different.
Yeah. And I'd say like Oxford is so much bigger than Cambridge. Cambridge does feel like you can walk anywhere for 5 minutes and see your friends or go to the park or anything. Yeah. So definitely also one thing to consider when you apply.
Yeah.
And I guess, did you just have no qualms about not applying to Oxford at all because you wanted to join the King's Choir again?
Yeah, I never really thought about applying to Oxford, to be honest. I mean, I think obviously living just outside it, that was quite a big thing. Obviously, I think I just wanted to go somewhere that was slightly further away. And the choir was a big part of my decision, definitely. But I think, as I said, I just sort of preferred Cambridge as a university city, I think, just for that reason. I know that some people are completely the opposite on that, but yeah, for me, I think I was always sort of more Cambridge inclined.
And obviously, Seb, you had a lot of pressure from the choir in that you had daily services and, I guess like 2 hours of practice every day. So how did you manage balancing the pressure from your Cambridge degree with the pressures from the choir, and also obviously taking care of yourself and sleeping and socializing? Yeah,
it was busy, definitely. It was busy, and it just forced me to be really, really organized with time, I think. I mean, it's worth stressing that a place like King's Choir is it's the biggest. St John's as well and Trinity choirs are the same sort of level, but they're the highest level commitment. So lots of the other college choirs will have maybe 1 or 2 services a week, so the time commitment's much less. But we had Monday off, which was always nice. But then Tuesday through Sunday was services every day, and we actually had at least 2 on a Sunday. So it was busy. It just forced me to be really, really on it with what I was doing and when I was doing it. I would generally go into quite a nice routine of it, because almost all of the lectures were in the morning. And then I then sort of scheduled all of my supervisions for the early afternoon. And basically at about 4 o'clock, I then had to go over to King's to sing. So we'd do a rehearsal and then do the service. So basically 4 till about 6:37 was out pretty much every day. Which obviously makes a bit of a big impact, because that was when lots of people did the bulk of their work, because they get back after supervisions and then go to the library and start working then. So it did take that out. But I got there and quite good at sort of segmenting the type of work. Music, it's quite varied. So lots of what we were doing was essays for the history side of the course, but lots of it was also about writing music and practicing those different styles. So I'd get back in the evenings and then do a few hours of the sort of more composition orientated work, rather than sort of try and do lots of big essays way into the night. I tended to sort of put them on a Monday, and I'd get that over and done with in sort of one big chunk and then do it that way. I know lots of my friends from the choir did similar sort of thing with the way that they did it. But yeah, just kind of forced you to be really on it with organisation, which has certainly helped me for later life. But yeah, it was intense, definitely, but it was manageable.
I'm sure that maybe your favourite part was probably to do with the choir and singing with King's Men. But what would you say was your favourite part of the music course?
I've always been more sort of interested in the composition-y side of things. I mean, I really liked learning about the history and learning the context behind it, but I was less focused on sort of the nitty-gritty musical analysis than I was on writing things and learning about how to write in different styles. So in my third year, I didn't choose a dissertation. My equivalent of it was pretty niche. I wrote throughout the year a 25-minute long mass for 4 voices in the style of William Byrd. So I was there in my, in sort of 2016, writing music, trying to sound like I was from the 15th century in my sort of really old Cambridge wood panel room. So it was a bit of a niche existence, but that's the sort of thing that I really like doing. Music students get a piano in our rooms, which is really nice. So I sort of get back, have some supper after the service, and then sit down at my piano and just write old school Renaissance polyphony for a few hours, which was slightly odd, but yeah, I loved it. It was great fun.
Thank you so much for explaining all this musical course to me. I'm also then really eager for you to talk to me about Corpus Christi College, because Corpus is actually a college that I don't remember going to that often. It seems a pretty, I don't know whether it's true, but it seems a pretty small, like secretive college. Could you first then start by describing Corpus to someone who would have never been to Cambridge in a sentence? Yeah.
So it's you're right, it is small. I think actually it's, in terms of size, is possibly the smallest of all the Cambridge colleges. Sum it up in brief: small and pretty. I loved it. I mean, I ended up there by chance because obviously I hadn't applied, but I absolutely lucked out because it's super central. It's right on King's Parade, which is the main street that goes through the middle of Cambridge. So it's really, really central. Location wise, it's amazing. And you go in through the Porter's Lodge, and then you've got possibly one of the most famous views actually in Cambridge. That chapel at the front is really distinctive, and it comes up in a lot of things. So there's New Court, which is that one, which is the newer one, obviously. And then there's another called Old Court, very cunning names. And that apparently is the oldest student accommodation in England. That's the claim. I think a few other people claim that as well. But yeah, it's really, really old. That's where I lived in second and third year, which is amazing because it's so beautiful. It's basically, it looks kind of like a sort of just circular thatched cottage around the edge. It's so nice. And so there's those 2 courts, and then there's a little really thin one which has got the library on one end of it, but that's kind of it actually. So that's the center. There's then obviously bits of accommodation elsewhere, but yeah, the actual main part's really, really small. But yeah, it's great. Really, really beautiful, really central. I think there are possibly, I don't know how many people per year, but I'd say it's no more than 100 really of people per year. So it's quite small. A kind of everyone knows everyone college. So really, really, really friendly. They pride themselves on that, I think, which is nice. Yeah, it was great. I was so lucky to end up there. And despite never having thought about Corpus, or as I said, never having been in before, I left feeling kind of really proud of the place as my college, which is, I think, about as good a sign as you can get, really.
Definitely. And yeah, I was going to say, you didn't even mention the clock, the Corpus Clock.
Sorry, yes, of course, the Corpus Clock. Yeah, quite something. It for those of you who watch this and have been to Cambridge, you'll almost definitely have seen it. For those of you who haven't, it's quite something. It's made of solid gold, and I mean, it is a clock, but it doesn't look like a clock. There's this sort of grasshopper thing on the top, which pulls the spinning wheel around it forwards, and that's the kind of metaphor that he's controlling time and pulling it that way. And then there's these blue lights that spin around the edge, and they're all little sashes for these lights, and then there's a really fast one which is a second, and then minutes and hours are in the middle, so it's actually pretty much impossible to tell the time from it. Also, you can hear it from the library, because it's that corner that it's on is the edge of the library. So when you're working in there, you sort of every hour when it resets, you get this kind of grating noise as the whole clock sort of resets itself. But it's kind of sad as well, because Corpus is amazing and it's so pretty, it's so beautiful. You've got the gorgeous chapel, but all that everyone knows about Corpus is this sort of pretty horrible clock that we've got on the outside. But it means that everyone knows where Corpus is, so it puts it on the map, shall we say.
Definitely, yeah. And Seb, we talked earlier and you said that actually the choice of college is not as important on your application as it may appear. So could you talk us through that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think obviously places like Oxford and Cambridge are quite distinctive because they have this college set up. So whilst you're applying to the university, you have to pick your college going in, and it can often become quite a big thing in people's minds. And certainly quite a few of the pupils that I've worked with get sort of really pent up about the college, and they think, oh god, this is going to dictate my experience there, and but this one has better stats for this course and this one has fewer people applying, so I think if I apply there I'll have, I think obviously it is important because you've got to go to a college that you think you want to be at, and the feel of different colleges is very different. If you think you'd like to be in a massive college which puts on big events and has lots of resources behind it, you obviously don't want to apply to a really small one. Or if you really like the idea that you go to a college and everyone knows everyone, then you probably don't want to apply to one of the really big ones. So it is important in a way, definitely, but I think it's easy for it to sort of dominate people's thoughts when they apply. You've got to bear in mind you're obviously applying to study your course at the university, and the college is just kind of where you live. It's exactly an important part because where you live is important. But yeah, I think it's definitely one thing that I say to people is think about it and consider it, but don't let it sort of dictate other things. You are applying for your subject at the university, and the college comes later. Particularly, with someone like me, I'd literally never been into Corpus before I took up my place, and yet 3 years later I blooming love the place. So if that doesn't kind of suggest that perhaps it's not the biggest thing in the world, then I'm not really sure what does. So I think important, but not the be all and end all, perhaps.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like, having also been through the pooling system, you definitely should know about the college that you're applying to, especially given that in a lot of episodes that we've done previously, people have said like, oh, I really wanted to go to this college because it had the supervisor that I wanted to study with, for example. But you may well go to the pool and then get fished out by another college that you'll be extremely happy to be at. But then it's obviously important to get to know the new college and not get too pent up about the fact that
exactly. And I mean, it's also
didn't have a place. It's
also important to bear in mind that just because you're at one college doesn't mean that you wouldn't have supervisions at another with other professors. I had supervisions at loads of different colleges. That's the whole point. So it's not like, you're in this one, sorry, you're stuck with them. It's the whole thing functions as a university, and there's a lot of movement between, you know, as a musician, the college music societies, when they put on their own concerts, you regularly go and play for other colleges. So, you know, I performed in loads of different college chapels, singing and playing cello and piano, because it just, you meet people, they get you involved, and it very much crosses the boundaries between them.
Yeah, I have to just agree with what you just said. And I'd also just like to talk about your experience, because it's so unique. I should mention that King's College Choir, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, is extremely famous, extremely renowned. It's one of, I think, the oldest choirs in the world. And it's got a really famous Christmas carol show that's aired on BBC. So it's just really big. So I was wondering, did you have any perks with singing with the choir or the Kingsmen?
Yeah, massive. I mean, term time was services. So that was your singing commitment during term time was just the services. But then in the holidays, that was where it became really good fun. It was always good fun, but it was amazing in that we'd either be doing lots of concerts in England. Christmas was the big one, because you were saying about the BBC service. There's also the radio one actually on Christmas Eve. So we were in Cambridge over Christmas singing. So you were doing loads and loads of concerts there, but we went on lots and lots of tours as well. So in the 3 years that I was there, we went to America twice, did the Far East a couple of times, went to loads of amazing places, did loads of concerts in Europe. When I was there as a boy, we actually went to Brazil once. So yeah, we got to sing in some pretty cool places in the holidays, which is amazing. I think we like to I was at home on average for about 30 days every year, because even outside of the really short terms, we were just singing in the holidays, either abroad or doing concerts in England. So as a kind of 20-year-old, to get to swan around America singing in your Easter holidays was it was pretty cool.
That's crazy. And I guess that really goes to show how dedicated you are when you're a music student, because obviously it's not really your degree, it's part of your life, it's part of who you are. I mean, it's obviously, when you go to a university, when you go to any university and study any subject, you're doing it because you really like the subject. But I think certainly, particularly maybe with something like music, it blends or blurs the line between your subject and your actual hobby and your life. I mean, I have now obviously started to make it my career as well. But yeah, it definitely, it's the thing that you like doing. So you're studying it, but also sort of doing it for fun at the same time. And therefore, you know, when you go home and you stop studying it, you're still going to do it because you're a musician. So it kind of, it's an all-round thing, which is nice. You've got to like it, let's say that much. I guess like you've obviously now become a teacher, so you've like switched. Did you have to do a year of training to become a teacher, or?
I went straight out of Cambridge to Uppingham School, where I was their music graduate, which was amazing. It was just a year of kind of waltzing around the music department, writing some music, conducting a bit, and just sort of generally chilling out in a really good school music department. I then went from there straight to the school I'm at now, and because it's an independent school, you can train on the job. So right. I just went straight in day one. Here are your classes, which was slightly intimidating at the start to kind of walk in front of 25 people and go, what do I actually do with these guys? But yeah, so I then trained on the job and am now a qualified teacher. But yeah, it's something I did on the job rather than sort of going and doing a university course in teaching. There is a very good one at Cambridge, which I was considering for a time. It's a really highly rated education course, and lots of people go to Cambridge to do a year to train to teach. But I thought I just want to get into a school and do it that way.
Yeah, and I guess like the skills you learned during your degree applied and really helped you for the role you're doing now.
Yeah, certainly for music, it feeds in, because obviously lots of my job is about the academic teaching. But a big part of my job is also directing the choirs, orchestras, writing music. We've got a big chapel here, and chapel's quite a big part of the school. So, you know, playing the organ in chapel, conducting the choirs there. So it fed quite naturally in having been at Cambridge doing what I was doing there.
Would you have to be like religious or of any religion to be a choral scholar?
No. I mean, quite a few people who are choral scholars are, because, you know, it is likely that if you've spent lots of time singing in chapels, you might be religious. But it's certainly not a prerequisite in any way, shape or form. You don't have to be religious at all. In fact, lots of the people I sung with very much weren't, but they enjoyed singing regularly in a chapel, and that was what it was for them. Obviously, you are, as a choral scholar in a chapel choir, singing chapel services. So there's the bit where you're not singing is readings, prayers, things like that. But no, you certainly don't have to be religious to be a choral scholar. It's, if you like singing and you want to sing in a choir, that's all you need.
Amazing. And I've always seen that, you know, there's, I think, also recent studies that prove that just singing in a group made you happier anyway. So it's not like
there's quite a lot of research actually that says that. It's quite a big thing.
It must have been a good 3 years.
Oh, I had a great time. Yeah.
Or a good life that you have.
Yeah, no, it's fun. And it's also, I mean, it was a big part of my musical life, but it was also a big part of your social life as well, because, you know, that group of 16, you just become really close with. And so I had my college life and my sort of Corpus social life, but I also had my choir social life as well. So it becomes a big part of your kind of all-round life. Rather, it's not just about the singing. On
that note of being happy and enjoying group singing, do you remember what could be your happiest day or your happiest memory at Cambridge? Graduation was a pretty cool day, I'll admit. Obviously having the whole family up, and basically the whole day is about, you've done amazingly. So that was fun. But I think probably the sort of lasting memory that I'll have was at Trinity Mayball, and as part of the King's Men, which is as a choral scholar at King's, you are part of the King's Men, which is the close harmony group. So it's much kind of lighter a cappella music. We sung at quite a few Mayballs, and one of the ones that we did a few years in a row was Trinity, and we had the closing set at Trinity. So there's a nice flat bit of grass in front of the Wren Library in Trinity, which just nips down onto the river, and they had the survivors photo. So you had about 2,000 people on that side of the river, and then there was 7 of us standing on the other sides, each with our own microphone, and our set was to sing while they were setting up for this survivors photo. And so the weather was amazing, and I just remember sort of the sun coming up over the library and looking out and seeing 2,000 people all in their, you know, black tie and ball gowns, and then there was just the 7 of us on one side of the river. I think we sung, one of the pieces definitely that we sung was Danny Boy. Singing that, looking over the river at 2,000 people on the other side with the sun coming up over the Wren Library was pretty cool. I think in terms of a memory to take away, that's probably up there. That is just such an amazing memory. And, it was cool. We've talked about Trinity Mayball when we had the Trinity episode, but we never mentioned the survivors photo. So obviously Mayballs are run from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. There is always a survivors photo at the end, and there's quite often a entertainment to make sure that everyone's still awake and smiling. And it is so special to be part of the ball in such a important moment that is the closing time in survivors photo. So I do actually remember seeing you perform and singing, and it's just so amazing. You feel like you've finished exams. It's just such a happy moment, and it's such a wonderful setting and memory that May Week's a pretty special one in terms of the Cambridge year. What would you say to people who are thinking about applying for a music degree at Oxbridge? What do you tell your students at Epsom, for example? I think
the biggest thing that I sort of stress and say to them is, you've got to think about what the application process and the interview process is about. And you've got to bear in mind, at the end of the day, the people that you will be talking to on an interview, they are in an unbelievably happy position in that they're very good academics. They've reached a real peak of academia. And one of the rewards of that is that they get to choose who they teach. And I think it's a really big thing to bear in mind. If the head came up to me and said, "Great news, Seb, we've changed school policy. You can choose who you teach," well, it'd be amazing, because you'd obviously, all of our pupils are wonderful, but you'd suddenly go, oh my word, I get to choose who I work with, and that's a really cool thing. It's quite rare, and so, turning up for an interview or preparing for an interview, that I say to them, be really aware of that and think, what do they want to see? Who do they want to work with? And I think, when we then talk about it, it kind of boils down to two things. One, obviously, there is a certain amount of knowledge that one needs to have. That is definitely the case. You want to work with and teach people who know what they're doing. So that's definitely a big part of it. And interview preparation has to focus on developing your knowledge and expanding your knowledge that way. But the other massive part of it is they want to teach people who like the subject and who are genuinely motivated by, inspired by, and interested in that subject. Because you can teach the cleverest person in the world, if they don't really like what they're doing, it's not going to be a rewarding experience. So showing how interested you are in that subject, I think, is a really important part of an interview. Obviously, in expanding your knowledge for the first one, it sort of develops naturally anyway. But if I say to them, imagine you've got two people who are both as bright as each other, or even one who's got slightly more better skills than the other, but one is quite, just drilled quite down the line, and the other exudes this kind of, oh my word, I love your subject so much, I want to study it. Obviously, you're going to take that one, because you're going to look at them and go, well, you're going to be really fun to teach, and you should be here because you love this. So the more that turning up for an interview, and therefore in the preparation for one, it can be about evidencing your love of the subject, that's great. So for something like music, I say just listen to loads and loads and loads of different pieces, so that then if you get asked, well, do you really like it? What have you listened to? You go, oh, well, I listened to this, and then I read this because I'd heard that, and then it fed into this. That just exudes a love of the subject. Whereas if you go, well, these pieces are on my A level, it doesn't exude the same thing. So whatever your subject is, I think developing a passion for it is a really important part of the application process. Studying at places like Oxford and Cambridge is intense, so you've obviously got to like it, but developing it in a way that you can show how much you love it, I think, is a big thing to stress as approaching and working up to an interview. That's certainly what I say here quite a lot. That
is just the right thing to say, and I'm so happy for your students that they have you as a teacher and a guide through this application process, because I would think that's what you just said is applicable to any degree, and you can really feel the passion that you have for music, so it's really great. And obviously you were just the perfect fit for Cambridge. So thank you so much, Seb, for coming here today and telling us about
pleasure.
Your Cambridge story. And look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you very much.
The party's on, the feeling's here. It only comes this time of year. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Christmas time. Wonderful time. Christmas.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you've enjoyed it, please do like, subscribe, and share it with as many people as you like. It would really help others find the podcast. Thank you.